Welcome to Sunday Soul Day, weekly fuel for your mind, body, and soul. We are back for part two with Summer Watson, consumer tech veteran, entrepreneur, investor, and master connector who's built extraordinary relationships and partnerships. Let's dive right in.
Take as much ownership for your life as you can. You'll feel better about, and you also will waste a lot less time waiting for something magic to happen.
100%, 100%. Well, you mentioned, and I love how you kind of threw it in there, but Summer is also a partner and president of Volume One Music. And you are doing extraordinary things there. Tell us really quickly before we get into your time at Aku. And I mean, you just have done so many extraordinary things, but would love to hear a little bit more about this because you're working with some really talented artists.
Yeah, and this started from a relationship as well. So somebody, a mutual friend who was a very traditional A&R at a music label, said, Summer, I'm working with this new manager. He reminds me of you. He just is like a nerd. He just talks about numbers. A&Rs are like, oh, this feels hot or whatever. He's like, you guys, I'm put you guys together. You guys can just talk about your data. And so he put us together. Again, it was a very similar experience. Like immediately, we realized we talk about different numbers, in an okay way, but like I was a product, Silicon Valley, like we're thinking about retention and, like 1 day retention and, minute by minute kind of data. And his background had come from, he had been in social media marketing. He was pivotal in like building the Team 10 house and, who people now know as Jake and Logan Paul.
Mhm.
And so we really quickly realized, oh, we both are into numbers, but our day-to-day is different sets of numbers. Respect, because I'm like, I wasn't in social media stuff, and he vice versa was like, oh my God, like these numbers you're talking about, that's crazy. And we walked away from that. I didn't think twice about it. And then maybe 2 weeks later, he texted me and he's like, hey, can we grab, one-on-one time? And so again, someone had to pursue me because I'm just like, if people didn't snap at me, I would probably just be sitting in a corner by myself, honestly, like it's stuck in my head. I also didn't realize when my husband was flirting with me, and now here we are, many, many years in. And yeah, we just, hit it off from there. And his name's Mike Spitz. He was the founder of Volume One, and he actually had met AJ through the Team 10 stuff and identified that AJ was super talented in a much different way. And so he had already been working with AJ, and they had released a song independently called Used to Be that just went incredibly viral, and all the majors, came after him, and that's how Volume One started. It's a joint venture with Sony Music. We work with a roster of three: AJ Mitchell, who's an incredible singer-songwriter from East St. Louis, just a voice for a generation I can't even explain. And he's got over 1 billion streams globally. Eddie Benjamin, who is a young genius, can play any instrument put in front of him, is dreaming up chord progressions that would blow anyone's mind. And musicians of every generation love to see his genius. He's both of them, like AJ's been playing piano since he was 6, wrote that first viral song when he was 13. Eddie, I think, was like playing in jazz bands in Australia with like grown adults from like 8 years old. They're just these little
Unbelievable.
kids. And yeah, Eddie's super talented, soulful singer-songwriter, instrumentalist as well. Opened for Justin Bieber on I think it was a Purpose tour. Time is just a warp at this point. And in the studio cooking up some amazing stuff. They both have incredible albums coming out. And then third, we have Kid Culture, who's a producer. Again, hyper talented. Like his process of producing and working with artists is so they're all, I feel like, from a different generation, energy wise. It's almost like they all should have been making music in the 70s and 80s. So Kid is very much like, he can get in with anybody and just build off of them. And so he's got, anything from a lot of Corday's catalog to like more mainstream kind of rap flows to he produced Yummy for Bieber. He produced all of Eddie's last record, album EP, all of AJ's next album, and all of these things sound different. And those are just some examples. Like he's worked with Terrace Martin, he's worked with it. So they're just incredibly talented, not of this world talent. They're all, you know, early 20s. Been working with most of them, with all of them since they were teens. They all have natural relationships with each other and with other creatives. And they just obviously infuse a lot of energy into me. And as you might imagine, I do my best to like cross my circle. So Pusha T is a huge fan, you know, and supportive. And when AJ's debut album came out, you know, he was one of the first to post and celebrate him. And I've brought them together in person. And yeah, I just it's an incredible group of creative people who really respect each other, and the teams, you know, the teams that support them.
It's unbelievable, but it doesn't surprise me because you are so great at attracting just incredible talent in every area that you've worked in. So, including being the co-founder and former president of Aku. And am I saying that correct? It's Aku? Okay.
Yeah,
It's that alone, like that whole time that you were there, is just amazing to me. Your company was on Time Magazine. It's just that's incredible to me. It's just incredible. And and I was so proud, of you because I know your journey, and to have a moment, like that is just, like I said, it's amazing, but it doesn't surprise me with you. So
it was a very personal time, for people who don't know, Aku is a young digital character, is a young Black kid who walked around in the real world with a space helmet on. And so even just seeing him, you're like, well, what is this kid, this Black kid with the space helmet walking around, the city is. And there was really three things that really resonated really from a personal standpoint. One is like thinking outside the box, and drawing outside the lines. And, I don't have this linear path in my life, in my career, but I just went with the things that felt right with the right people. And to, hopefully put something out there that encourages people like, hey, you don't have to be one thing. You don't have to be afraid to change what the thing is that you want to do or spend your time with. And so, even if other people look at you and are confused, that's okay. Are you good? You're good with that space helmet? All right. So that's one thing. The second was, he was a dreamer. So really encouraging and making sure people felt that, not unrelated power to dream without limitations. And then, yeah, not last but not least, around the time, Push had a son who actually is his fourth birthday today. But he was a pandemic baby and impossible to shop for, as you can imagine. And so I was like, hey, let's gift him this kid as a sculpture. This, Black kid in a space helmet, looking cool in the world. And it felt like a great personal touch for him. And so I really tried to actually hide it from Push before it launched, because I wanted it all to be a surprise, and from Virginia, his wife. But ultimately, we had to do the damn thing. So I pulled him in, and the 2 nights before we were launching as an NFT, I said, hey, there's not a ton of marketing plans in place right now, but we have a ton of marketing assets. And let me just tell you about this kid, Aku. And immediately he got it, and he said, who else should we call? Let's get the whole family behind this. This is an important message, and it's important for kids and families to see the kind of examples, the kind of content, the kind of stories that we would want, the Harlans, the Huntleys, the Nigels of the world to see themselves. And so that for me was the biggest driver. I take my wider network and the next generation that we're all building up really seriously. And I remember the moments of my parents giving me that power to dream, and that that power to be me, and not try to put me in a box, even when they didn't understand. When I was working for that record label in college, to this day my mom would probably say I was working at a record store. She just didn't understand the difference, but she's like, whatever, you're happy, do it. And I want to wherever possible give that same energy to folks, especially I think in this world where everything feels so uncertain, and with all the choices we have, it's almost harder to make the choice, right? It's like there's just so many different opportunities to and outside of systems and outside of corporate structures, that I do see some of the young people that I believe in, taking longer or struggling with the confidence to find their path. We talked about my niece, and she's like an incredible tattoo artist, and she's so talented, and just trying to infuse that confidence in her all the time for her to see what other people see. She's there now, I think, but it's definitely been a journey to just say, like, you're great at this, and people see your talent. And so to be able to do that, systematically at scale, I wouldn't center it on Aku even. I'd say everything I've ever done has been with some version of that goal.
Yes, and I love that the common thread runs through not only Aku, but some of the other companies that you've built or are currently developing. Because we live in a world that often pressures us to conform. And, I feel like your work stands out by encouraging, you know, a lot of us at all different ages to embrace our differences, pursue our dreams, and also kind of tap into our zone of genius. And I feel like Aku is so special in the NFT character that was created because it really empowers not just the younger generation, but also adults, making significant impact through its art and messaging.
Everything I do, I think about
Exactly.
families too. And so, the job was not done. And as you know, there's other avenues and places that we're building, that my network and I are building in different ways. And honestly, I can't imagine that any job will ever be done, but I really do. And everything I've done, a big guiding light for me is like, how many people can I impact? Um, not in a way that's like, oh, haha, but in a, I see sometimes the magic that we each create with each other on a one-on-one basis. Like, can I build the systems that help us amplify that for each other? And so even that example that you just brought up, I was able to bring in, you mentioned the art, like 3D artists who I had worked with at Skybound and at Pocket Gems. We had by then really refined this incredible distributed network of 3D animators who had worked on everything from Jurassic Park to Star Wars, to come together and build out these worlds with us. To I even brought in volume one in different ways. We were doing a in real life activation, and so AJ came and performed with Kaylani, and we did a private dinner where I brought together Push and AJ and Spitz and all these people, like really trying to bring these worlds together so that people could not, like I said, I feel like we could all get further together. And so I don't want to have this incredible network of incredible people and keep them to myself selfishly. It's like, how do I unleash your brilliance on the world? I never want to be the gatekeeper of brilliance. And so that's why I say the job's not done. Obviously, I'm not working on that anymore, but there's so many things that we've already done quietly, and some publicly, and some will even more publicly to come. The network, the family, the team, the family. Really, I think family is overused in a professional setting, but I really do feel in my tightest of circles, I've built an incredible family. And we all are just so aligned in our goals and our missions, our whys, our hows, that it's, I call it a network of go getting, go givers.
Love that.
That can't lose.
No, absolutely. Well, and you've also done some really cool investing in music, tech, gaming, and also cannabis, and probably others as well. I'm probably missing some, but what criteria, because you're so amazing at building these like incredible networks of people, and your inner circle is really incredible, but like when you're kind of evaluating a company, like what kind of criteria do you look for, like, and what kind of gets you excited about investing in different companies?
I would say I probably don't have a lot of unique perspective there, because it's a kind of a tried and true game, and I do my best to make sure that I'm involved in things that I understand in a way that I could actually make impact. that they're working in an area with big enough opportunity for both the hard capital and the soft capital of time and attention to make sense, right? So the TAM, the total addressable market. So like, are they doing something where they can get to a big audience, or at least influential audience, because you can also see sort of, and by influential, that could be local, influential, whatever it is that people can expand the impact. Obviously the core sort of, business model, like, do you have a flywheel, or am I confident that you can get to a flywheel for meaningful revenue to build a real business? I really, even when you think about how I entered the tech business, I entered in a game business. It wasn't one of these businesses where it's like, build it and they will come. I was attracted to it because they were already on a run rate of $60 million. So it's like, can we be sure that this can ultimately be a self-sustaining business that that is not going to depend on just endless rounds of funding, and that they can get to where they need to get to make their impacts. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, maybe first, who is it? Because the mission is hard. It is always hard, and there's going to be lots of ups and downs. Are they capable? Are they dedicated? Are they going to get through the hard? Do they believe in what they're doing? Because if you're just in it for the money, when it's hard, people quit. And so who's going to have the fortitude to go through the ups and the downs? And do they have like a unique insight or unfair advantage on what they're doing? Do they have, do they understand they're building, vertical video for TikTok? Are they the best, if not at least among the best of people to understand vertical video? Is this the thing that they're like living and breathing and obsessed with? Because that's the level it takes to get the outcomes that they deserve, and that are kind of, again, scarce hard and soft capital deserves.
That's so good. That's so good. I love what you said, and it resonates as such a common theme that I hear often with great investors. They invest in the person first, not just the idea. And they really seek out founders who are deeply obsessed with their work, kind of possessing this almost insane belief in themselves. These investors, I feel like they kind of prioritize qualities like grit, perseverance, tenacity, because they know it's hard to build a company, like it's hard to, and not only build a company, but build a successful one. And it's definitely not for the faint of heart. So it's interesting to hear you talk about it. And then, I worked in a VC firm, shout out to Goodwater Capital, as well as just been around, a lot of different investors at different levels, including my dear friend Ryan Neese. So we could talk all day about your background, this and I'm sure the audience is gleaning all kinds of gems from this conversation. But one of the things I wanted to talk about was a little bit more personal. And feel free to share as much as you're comfortable with, but you kind of recently had some health challenges. And I know that when you are, striving for excellence, doing all these incredible things, a lot of times we are so great at taking care of others, and so great at showing up for others that we sometimes forget ourselves. And so tell me a little bit about some of the health challenges that you experienced, and more importantly, like, how did it impact you and kind of change you into how you're prioritizing your health and well-being today?
Yeah, so it happened about 2 months before a huge launch. So looking back, it probably wasn't a coincidence. In the moment, I had no idea. When it first hit, I thought heart attack. Then I thought, no, it's a panic attack. I just don't know what a panic attack is, but that's definitely this. And I just kind of like started to sweep it under the rug, like, oh, I'm sure it's fine, just need to calm down. And eventually it just didn't go away. So we rushed to the hospital. They obviously prioritized me. To this day, we're not exactly sure what triggered it. But it was just, it turns out I have a bunch of people in my family have a more extreme version of this, but anemia. So my hemoglobin, my blood levels had just dropped to dangerous levels. I think you're supposed to be, if I remember correctly, around 12. I remember my dad went through something when he was really sick, and he was at like 7, and they thought it was scary, and I was at like 5. It's so, like crazy. And so we still don't know. At the time they were checking everything, internal bleeding, like they were checking for cancer, and so they ended up keeping me in the hospital for a week, which was awful. I had no idea what it was like to be in a hospital like that, especially like conscious of it. I think the only time I'd been in a hospital before that was like for my tonsils when I was a kid. And I just honestly got really lucky. I had one doctor who was just obsessed with making sure they did everything they could to figure it out. Every specialist you can imagine came to, do their thing. And probably for cost reasons, they'd never like to have you there for too long. Many were like, oh, well, leave and check. And this one doctor who was the cancer specialist, and blood doctor, hematologist, maybe not a coincidence that he was the one obsessed, right? He just made sure I got every test known to man. And I at least came away knowing that we bottomed out everything we could while I was there. Um, and eventually, as he maintained, I still see him every 3 to 6 months, for checks on my levels, for iron infusions. He's just absolutely wonderful. And yeah, we just went even deeper on genetics, DNA, and everything, and it turns out it was probably just, I live with a level of anemia that I hadn't realized before. Still don't know what the trigger was, but it definitely was a wake up moment. And maybe it was stress, maybe it was just being in that intense time. But I think the big things I took away from it were things that I probably always lived with, in terms of, like I said, I grew up with for known reasons, a very acute sense of mortality. And so I never took life for granted. And I never took people around me for granted. But these moments still somehow reinforce those, right? Like who showed up, how, all the people you can imagine did. Pusha T has never FaceTimed me once in his life, but decided to FaceTime me that because he knew I needed a laugh and I wasn't gonna turn that video on. My parents drove, an hour to come see me multiple times. My husband was in there every day. It was just people I was working with, picking up the pieces to make sure that things moved, and also still saying, hey, we knew you did a lot, but we didn't know how much you were doing now that we're picking up your pieces. Just all those things, and just to be more more in tune with yourself, like even in the moments where I kept delaying going to check it out. Now I realize, yes, it wasn't any of the horrible things they thought. It wasn't cancer, it wasn't internal bleeding, any of that. But it was clearly a dangerous level, and if I had just kept staying at home, who knows, what had happened. So being really listening to your body, and not I never thought I was invincible, but I certainly was behaving like I thought I was invincible, and just letting yourself recover and recoup. I still, I still go hard because I take on things that require it, and I frankly love it. But I do listen to my body, and more importantly, listen to my husband, who nags me all the time, even before this, right? So to let myself be taken care of, and listen to the nagging parents and all that. So probably I think it was like this weird in between where it was very disruptive to my life. It was very scary. The uncertainty of all the things that they were worried about and testing for, that like was the biggest mental challenge. But at the same time, I came out of it unscathed and with something very manageable, and so I think maybe nothing as earth shattering as it could be, but I'm still like intellectually I'm aware of all those things, because we struggle, we have family and friends struggling with much more serious things all the time. And so just making sure I don't minimize that, or consider myself immune from any of that.
Yeah. Now, how do you like take care of yourself now? Like, are you better at it, or are you still, is this a work in progress for you? Because we're all at different levels on our path, right? And so one of the questions we ask everybody on Sunday Soul Day is, how do you fuel your mind, your body, and your soul? Like, how do you take care of yourself? So your regular rituals, like, do you have some non-negotiables?
Yeah, Sunday is a pretty close to non-negotiable. Every Sunday, as you know, I go and spend the day with my parents. My mom always cooks a home cooked meal. And this started, I didn't always live within driving distance with them, especially when I was working with you and going to school. But another kind of earth, one of those moments happened. Short story is my childhood home went up in flames. It was pretty bad. It was on the news and everything, and my dad was trapped inside. And we struggled for about 6 months of him being in different levels of ICU, not even just in the hospital, different levels of ICU that I learned about for the first time. And he was actually unconscious for half of that.
Mhm.
Um, and all of the things, that you would imagine come out of that in terms of the doctors saying it's, you should be making harder decisions now. And but once he got out and beat the odds yet again, survivor, um, once he got out and beat those odds, I just had been in the habit of, even when it first happened, I had just started a new job in San Francisco. And I told them right away, this is happening and I need to be here. I was sleeping in the hospital basically almost every night for that 6 months. And so working remotely, I remember being in the hospital, like on my laptop, crazy stuff. And so I just got in the habit of just showing up, of us all showing up together. My sister already lives 5 minutes from my parents. And so since that happened, I've been going out at least once a week, sometimes more, and sometimes I'll, spend the night a few nights, just to make sure we really have that time. And for us, we're not very emotive people. We're not very physically, even though physical touch is my love language, it's like only a few people, uh, it's more like I like to get massages. But we're not, our love language as a family is just like spending time.
Yeah.
So sometimes when
And
we
food. Your
a
mom throws
lot of
down.
food,
So yeah.
gumbo. And so yeah, my husband, when he first entered the family, he's like, you guys are so weird. Like you will be there and like not talk, but you seem to enjoy each other. I'm like, yeah, we just have to be there. So Sunday is my refresher day, and it is, there are times when things creep up, and if they have to, I'll tell people but I make sure they know, yeah, I'll take this call, but just so you know, I'll be at my parents' house, so they know the context. And sometimes it'll push that off. So that's one big non-negotiable for me. Other than that, a similar time with my husband. I travel a lot typically, but when we're home, we spend time. He's my best friend. We go on walks. We call them family walks, us and the dogs. And just making sure we get that fresh air and some movement. Goal of 15,000 steps a day. He always hits it. Sometimes I don't. I've got more conference calls. But those are the things, like finding those moments to move, and being in tune with what that is. Like for me, I like to move if it's either, a walk, something I can control, or like there's a couple sports I like, tennis. I always liked karate, but I don't like group classes. I don't really like running, so I know, like, let me try not to do the things that I don't love to do, because then I just won't do them. And
Facts.
running, it's just like my knees. I've even as a kid, I'm like, I know this logically is bad. It's speaking
Oh
to a
my
track and
God.
field.
I know.
So,
Well, it does wear on your body really bad over time. So you were absolutely right. Um, but no, I love that. And you and I shared, similar kind of thing with our families around Sundays, because in my family, they wouldn't, it's like we had to be in the house. Like even if we weren't physically together, or like you talking to one another, it was the energy of us just all being there. And I think it's something that I will always remember as a child. And so I try and do that with my kids on the weekend, is like Sunday is our day. And so I love that non-negotiable with your family, and I imagine that fuels you up, in a way that just any external things just can't. So
yeah, I love
no,
them.
love
None of
that.
us are perfect, but I love them. And
No, none of us are.
I just gotta zone out in my music.
All works in progress. That's for sure. All of us. So, and that's the beauty though of this, like that's why I love this show and so many other podcasts where people are sharing their journeys and sharing, the highs and the lows of that journey, It's so important to realize that none of us are perfect and we're not supposed to be. We're supposed to constantly be peeling ourselves back and learning and growing and doing, And so I love that. You have just such an incredible career. Like what advice, would you give aspiring entrepreneurs, especially because I know like you have worn the entrepreneur hat since you were young. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs, like maybe just starting off or breaking into the tech, gaming, or media industries?
Yeah. I think that perseverance, the go get it,
Mhm.
figure out what you want and go get it. So even my first entry into tech, I didn't know anybody. And I just decided I want it. And I figured out like what's my easiest way in, and then to prove myself, and then either push for or know that more opportunities would come. So I came into Playdom as a lawyer. Obviously, I wasn't intending to stay a lawyer, and it just so happened that the person I interviewed with was on the same page, and so I got that, and then I decided this is mine. That's another story, but the and we've gone, but I definitely like we locked in, and that changed my life. And once we did the job that we agreed to set off on, literally they said, "What do you want to do here? You can have any job in this company you want." And that is what changed my life there. Um, Similar, how I said we started CS Global and just picked up, clients with that perseverance. And just like remember that you like the worst that people can say is no, which is hard, but it's not the worst thing that could happen to you, So if you really decide you want something, there's actually one of the people I mentioned who I met through them seeing what I was doing with Air. He had been out of work for probably 3 years, and he's having a really tough time. But at some point, he decided, and this is very recently, he latched onto one company that he really wanted to work with, and they didn't have a role published, any of that, and he just like said what he wanted. And it took about 6 months, but just about 3 weeks ago, he started his dream job. And you know that something else might have opened up for him, but he really determined this is the thing he wanted. It is a perfect thing for him, and he made it happen. So that, and then once you get the opportunity, and again, you might have to build into the opportunity you want, right? Like I came into Playdom as a lawyer, that's not what I intended, but then I got to move into product. um Make sure that you take advantage of it, like again, nothing's coming to you. Don't assume that people understand what you've contributed. Like make it obvious. And I'm not a loud person, so I'm not someone who's like, look at what I did, but I just did things I think that were impactful enough that they couldn't miss it,
Yep.
And then as that happened, my network started building. People knew what I was capable of. They kept coming, we kept gravitating towards each other, and I just always are in tune with the signals, like don't ignore the signals, and don't ignore the things that are meant for you. All of those things are very hard. Like if it was easy, to get exactly what you wanted, it would be it's not. So maybe that advice is like tough to track, but I would just say, try to track it to your life. And a lot of it is just not taking any moment for granted and doing everything in your power to create the life and the opportunities that you want.
No, that is like a gem. Hopefully you guys grabbed your notebook. That was so good. And I love you kind of touched on something that is so powerful. And I think like it's really like knowing yourself too, and knowing what you want. And in order to get to where you are trying to go, you have to know like where you want to go. So it's like you mentioned your friend who like was holding out, because they wanted to work at that particular company. Like he's like, I'm not accepting anything except for that. Like that's amazing. But I think a lot of times,
Open to
you
other
know,
things and apply to other things, but because you have to be smart,
yeah,
right? It could be that
yeah,
that thing doesn't happen, but he's never stopped pursuing that thing. and,
exactly.
and all those other things didn't happen. His dogged pursuit of that one has obviously changed his life.
Yep.
The flip side, there's another person that I met in almost the same timeline who's has been working but has like struggled with getting to the place that she wants to be. And my biggest feedback was, what do you want? Like, how do you,
Exactly.
because she's like not getting the opportunities and the recognition that she wants, but it's also not clear what she wants, And so I literally just had to kind of hold the line and say, like, come back, come to me when you know what you want. And then when you know what you want, I will work with you to help get it.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what to want.
No.
You might end up in a place that then I'll feel
And
terrible.
no, and that's it's so true, but that's where that self-reflection and really a lot of self-awareness, comes into play. And a lot of times people are almost afraid to go in deep and even articulate what they want,
Or
because
they're
a part of them feels like they either don't deserve it or they can't get it. So that's such great advice, especially for an entrepreneur, because as you know, I'm on this journey and learning a ton and making a ton of mistakes, which is amazing. But it's been so like it's because I'm doing right and just I understand like what my larger kind of goals are. Um, it's been really helpful for me, like as I'm going along, but I'm also creating new goals along the way as I learn more. So it's like, so that's another thing that I would say too, is like, yes, know what you want, but then also like be open to, learning, because you're going to learn more, and it allow you to dream even, slightly different and bigger, so I love that.
keep your
Um,
head swivel. Life.
yeah, man, facts. Like one of the things, gosh, I mean, we can talk all day, but you had mentioned something, and now a couple times, and I just want to touch on it because I'm really curious because I had very similar thought process growing up. But you mentioned, having this like vision, thinking that you were going to die young. Like I've never told anyone that, but that was very similar with me. I always thought I would die in my 40s, and I don't know why. I had that number in my mind. But it always allowed me to like chase, I was like on this like I have to just accomplish. And I think I still have it in me too. Which is why like, most people will write like a children's book and I've already written four, so it's like, and I'm on this like where I don't know where the sense of urgency comes from, but it's just in me and I don't know how to shut it off. So I'm so curious because I feel like you're very similar in that way. And like where do you think that came from?
I mean, mine was very specific. I think
Mm.
it's funny, there's a woman I had worked with who sadly lost her parents when she was
Oh,
um when we were in our late 20s, and she super hard period, but she also said, I've never lost anyone before. And so I think a couple things I had, um I lost my grandmother when I was 7, and we were obviously super, super close. I've now realized that my mom and dad actually would drop me off at her house, and I'd be in like would in Stockton. They would go back to LA. I didn't realize I was there for that much. So we were super close. I lost some friends to like really in tragic ways in high school, college, and most pointedly, I I don't mind sharing this because it's not on us, but both of my parents were married before. They were married to each other, and one of them had actually a very an ex who was very much in our lives and very threatening. And so I literally like, was did feel under threat very tangibly from an early age. And even as I learned to drive, and even still now, if you drive with me, you'll see it's like a habit. I just haven't been able to break. I'm checking my mirror all the time. I'm just like, I'm always aware of everything around me for that. And also just obviously my dad being who he is kind of trained us that way to like always be on the lookout. So I just had, I think I maybe didn't always have, it's ironic. There's another friend I had who grew up in a rougher part of town. We met in law school. And he would say, because we got to know each other really well, he's like, I lived, in a tough part, but inside my house, it was like the Cosby Show. he's like, your house. And like on the outside, it looks like Leave It to Beaver, but like inside. So I think I just, my parents, again, like so thankful of the life they built for us and all the advantages I had and like those comforts that I grew up with. And then we just had all of these other elements, family and not family, like even also choices I made with friends in some of those pivotal years that never, I never, was I don't know that I always had that like the the level of safety and stability that they definitely had fought for and tried to build.
Yeah.
And it's partly why I probably fight for it now. Like my house and my inner circle are such a safe space. And the moment that it doesn't feel, I'm like, I'm on
Yep.
a protective mode.
Facts. No,
So
I
you
love that
if
you
you're gonna
should.
do that or not, but it was, yeah, it's like, I don't think I mean,
No, it's
maybe,
interesting. I
you know,
think that's what it was. It's like I had death, same high school, like early experiences with death. And it I never took life for granted, which is why I think I always have this kind of like energy, you know me well, but where, I'm like glass is always full. It's not even half full. So like
and I
uh,
don't think I wasn't sad about it. It was just reality,
yeah.
anything I
No,
took.
exactly. You just like embrace it, right? Like I
And now
know.
I'm like, I feel, it's kept me really safe in a lot of ways. And I like that am always aware and have my head on a swivel, and people around me who understand that also feel safer and probably also approach life similarly. Like, and I think that's the thing is I think I'm like my inner circle, we all kind of are walking in the world in the same way that we can't control everything, but we're gonna be as safe as possible, and some of it comes from some of those early experiences, and it's not a maybe this is a coping thing, but I don't feel like it's a trauma thing. I feel like it's a strength.
Absolutely. I think so too. No, it's just interesting you said that. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that about you. So love that. I love when I get to learn something new about you and others in my inner circle. What's next for you? Like what, as you kind of look ahead and all the things that you've already done and are currently doing, I was thinking about like just this world of AI that we're in right now and all of the advancements and just how fast and rapid it's moving. Like, how do you see AI even just shaping the future and all the industries that we
Yeah.
mentioned that you worked in and are involved in.
It's so
And
incredible, it's so
yeah, tell
exciting.
me
And
about that.
actually, I have to jump in a few minutes to get on a call for an AI project I have that I am working on launching for somebody else around youth mental health. It's really interesting, really exciting. But I think I'm getting pretty deep there. There's a lot of thoughts there that we can get into. But on the creative side, I think there's two major things I'm excited about. One, there's a lot of opportunity for AI to really um, help the creative process. Like even if you think about the 3D work I've done, there's so many elements of that are just tedious, that can be automated, even if a human still has to come and do the final touches to make sure, it's depending on the level if you're just trying to do something quick for social media, that's one thing. But if you're trying to do, Jurassic Park, that's another. But there are parts of that process that certainly can be sped up. And as you take some of that tedious work out of the creative's hand, that leaves them even more space to do some of the crazy stuff that's to come. So I love that piece of it. And I think I've seen a lot of companies trying to tackle parts of that, and they're still not quite there in terms of a lot of people are trying to be like, we're going to make the creative process easier. Like, we don't need the ideation piece done for us. Maybe someday we'll desire, but that's not the pain point. The pain point is taking the idea into reality. And there's so many places between those two points that AI is able to contribute at a really, really high level, one. And two, as we break down the barriers of kind of the fear, the misunderstanding, the early stages of what AI tools can do in the hands of creatives, it's going to be wild. Like even the moment we've seen already with Wallonius and BBL Drizzy, I just love that as a point for people to see look at the cultural impact you can make if you're not afraid to figure out how to use this, to bend this at your will. And we're just scratching the surface there. Amazing. And then all the way to, more infrastructure thinking. I'm looking at a model around a decentralized LLM that will help really think about, a lot of especially conversational AI that people are looking at has been drawing from publicly available data, which to me can become this recursive cycle of like the things it's spitting out are based on things that already are there, and then it just you get in this cycle, as opposed to all the offline data that is this incredible repository, especially as you get more specialized for something like youth mental health. Is there, with the project I'm working on, there's like all these internal resources around both research and clinical work that like is obviously not published. The patient's data is not published, but if you can bring that data into really private, keeping it private, and actually Apple made some announcements even for the consumer side of private protected, siloed use of your data for your own personal use on AI. I think there's a whole wide sort of thing that we've barely touched yet that could get interesting. And then of course, everything in between, like some of these specialized uses of AI for, like I said, youth mental health. I'm also looking at it with some of the development and production process in Hollywood, the TV entertainment, and then obviously we're looking at stuff for music as well. So it's an area that is exciting to me. It's a genie that's not going back in the bottle. So sit around and complain, or you could figure out how it works and how to make sure that you're part of what's about to come.
I love it. That is perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for always with your amazing energy and support and belief in me. And like I've said, I'm not, as I've said privately, I'm not naturally a vocal communicator, but I hope that you always feel the energy of how much this is reciprocated, the respect, the admiration, and the appreciation for you and your work and all of the exciting new things that you've taken on in a really bold and fearless way.
Always, always.
Face. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Appreciate you, sis. Love you. And everyone have a beautiful Sunday.